years before that. So then I gave her this morning. I gave her that generic insurance we had, or the insurance we had was some generic. But it was only like $320. So I gave her one of those. That didn't do anything. So then at 9, I gave her. We tried the So I gave her a lot of that. She tried this headache and it worked. She was feeling really good. I saw her around 1. She calls me at 2:30. Like, well, Dad will be home in a little bit. I don't know. So, yeah.
I didn't know they did such a thing with
Yeah.
mixing that.
Yeah, which is, it seems to really work. So, yeah. Yeah, it was definitely good. So, but we'll have to get, I told her, like, you gotta wait till 5:30. Can't have any more until then. So, hopefully we'll give her some more in a little bit. She'll be all right. I'm hoping it's just a 24-hour. So, yeah. I didn't realize much of stuff was going on. It must be, yeah. I heard a few kids aren't doing well. Yeah, 24 hours. Yeah, I know, that's the thing. Never ends. Never ends. Yeah, yep. He's 15. Yeah, and then my oldest daughter is 17, but both of them slept until 10. My daughter finally rolled out of bed at like 10. And then my boy, I think I went in by him at like 11:30. It must be so nice. Just, oh my gosh. Good grief. So that's why I didn't feel bad leaving. I'm like, oh, yeah. But she'll be fine. But you have any vacations coming up? Nothing planned? Yeah. We go next Friday. We're doing that big loop around out west. So we're going to go to Mount Rushmore, Yellowstone, and then we're going to Lake Tahoe, Vegas, Grand Canyon, over to Texas.
Good evening, everybody. It is 5:15, and welcome to the Thursday, July 13th, 2023 CISM meeting. I will bring this meeting to order with item number 1, approval of the June 8th meeting. Is anybody see any discrepancies in the minutes, or if not, can I have a motion for the minutes, to approve the minutes? Motion by Alder Denny. Do I have a second?
This one we need to keep on.
So I think we're off.
There we go. There we
Now
go.
we're on. All right. For the record, I'd move to approve the minutes from last meeting.
I'll second.
Okay, and a second by Alder Henke. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right.
And any opposed? I guess that passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 2, discussion and possible action on parking restrictions on the east side of Riverview Drive from 3736 Riverview Drive to North Evergreen Road. Alder McElhaney, would you like to come up here and address the?
Hello, thank you. Sorry, I just got back from Point to really rammed it. This isn't in my district, and I'll just give you a quick summary. We have had complaints. I get complaints. DPW gets complaints. Inspections gets complaints every year regarding parking of trailers, boat trailers, all of that on the east side of the road. Riverview Drive is the east side of the road is city right away and then railroad. There's a railroad track going there. There are no houses on that side, just on the west side of the road. But of course, it's along the river and people have that. I get calls. We kind of are playing whack-a-mole with our inspections department, and we came into an issue this year about we can send letters and then go back, and inspections will say, like, we are using a lot of staff time. Then we decided, well, do we do no parking? And I did get one feedback from one neighbor. Everyone was for it. One neighbor was worried about parking for things like grad party. Somebody has some more bigger event. And, I don't want to micromanage people living their lives in their homes. I don't want to do that. So I'm kind of want this committee's input in how we could manage that. But by putting no parking or no parking overnight, we would eliminate inspections doing that. That would be a policing action then, instead of inspections and letters and then that wait. So that is, a letter went out to everyone. We did get calls. Most people are for it. They just don't want to lose their ability to have an event or something and not be able to park on that side of the road at times.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else in the chambers that would like to speak on this item?
Yes, sir.
I'll come up and state your name and your address, please, sir.
Lee Kelly, 4010 Riverview Drive. I've been there since 1990, 33 years. And the gist of your letter is to us, I basically approve of, as far as restricting the parking of trailers and things on the other side. That's okay. I mean, I'm not in favor of that. I don't do it. But like she said, if you restrict parking on the east side and the letter said you can't park on the right of way, that's going to inhibit people having Bible studies and things like that, parties with more cars that won't fit in the driveway. So that sort of worries me, is how do you implement that? How do you enforce it? How do you communicate all of that? The other part about trying to fix the problem where people dump their leaves and yard waste on the east side of the road, I'm in favor of trying to prohibit that too. Don't like to see piles of brush and stuff like that. But what do you do about it? We had a big storm last summer and you picked up leaves and trees and branches in the rest of the city and you didn't pick them up on our street. We don't understand that. Well, that's most of it. If we can't park our cars on the road, that's a problem. So there are some other issues that are related to our living there, but I'll
We'll just
address
stick to the
that at
agenda
another
item.
time with Becky or somebody.
Thank you. Come forward, please.
Thank you. My name is Paul Book. I live at 4030 Riverview Drive. I have been a property owner there since 1998, 25 years. Mr. Lindman's letter stated to provide written comments. I only made one comment. But do you want the information that I provided, Ms.?
Sure, you can, if you want to verbally share it here too, for the
Yes, I
record,
will.
that would be fine. Yeah. But we'll make sure that this gets in the record. Thank you.
I would, in regards to parking and boat trailers and such, I'm just going to say that in the time I've lived there, when I moved, the road ended. I was the last house, and there was no cul-de-sac there. It was just the narrow road. And I can't recall ever not being able to get in and out from the street out to 6th Street to leave the house. That has not been an issue ever from that standpoint. If anything, it gets a little tricky in winter sometimes when a car is parked out because it's a narrow street and the snowplow drivers do an excellent job in trying to push the snow as far to the east as possible, but it's very limited. And Sometimes when people have an event at their house, if you get vehicles parking on both sides, you're down to idle speed. And so, but it's never been an issue as far as getting in and out. If anything, there's been an icy condition problem, which because of all the big white pine trees that are on that street. And last winter I called twice. Spot sanding doesn't quite work. And you were the street department, who's ever responsible for getting the sand out to the street, was very quick in responding and doing the whole street, because once the street is one of the last ones to get plowed, and people are in and out, and so it gets packed down, and it doesn't get scraped clean, and that's not the problem. That's not a problem with the snowplow drivers. It's just the nature of the situation, you know. I put together some pictures there for you, and I put a list of an index there. The first one was the storm from June 14th of 22. That picture is from showing my front yard, but the right side of that picture, you can see the street and all the debris that's laying out there. I cleaned up and put my materials out on the street. Then a few days later, it was announced that, and I believe the mayor made the announcement that they were not going to be doing any storm damage pickup. And so it took me about 30 days to get somebody to remove it. So I don't know if that's part of the complaint at that point in time, you know. Then the other pictures, picture number 2, you'll see I circled a number of trees there. I don't know if it was Wisconsin Public Service or if it's the railroad company. That's their property. And there's, in that picture, just right in front of my house, there's 5 mature trees that were simply topped and cut off, and all the debris has left rotting for the last 5-6 years. You can identify even the woodpecker holes now as they get into that. Picture number 3, which is basically the same view but a much closer up, you'll see there's a fire hydrant buried in brush. Okay, and then picture number 4, when the front end loader removes the snow or pushes the snow.
I'm sorry, sir, but
Yeah.
we're talking about the parking situation right now. This is not on the agenda, so.
Well,
would you
in
please-
some way it
please
is
keep your
because it's
comments-
talking about the brush and debris, and things are not getting cleaned up properly for people, and they end up, if they have to park farther out into the street. My understanding is that the right-of-way, you're saying here, parking not on the right-of-way. Now, are you talking long-term parking, or are we talking parking that is for an event happening at somebody's house for the evening, or not, you know?
Well, typically, you know, like when most streets within the city have curb and gutter, right? And this
Right.
street is more of a rural. When it gets reconstructed, it will get curb and gutter. And so parking is restricted to the street, right? So we're talking about the hard surface and not like outside that hard surface. You know, most people will pull off because they can, you know. And so, I mean, just technically by ordinance, that parking needs to remain on the street. And on that east side of the street, there's off the edge of the blacktop, the city only owns about 6 feet of property.
Yeah,
So-
it's basically the telephone pole
Right.
line, the
So-
whole length of
So
the street.
everything else
Yeah.
is outside of our jurisdiction. It's just the railroad.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And I understand that we
Yep.
had this discussion maybe 5-6 years ago.
Right.
Also. I want to point out your comment in regards to curb and gutter. That brings up, is that the first southern half or 2/3 of that road On the west side, the right-of-way is basically the width of the road. And the engineering department was there this week marking to do a tree count for inventory for the park department, wanting to know. So you mean you would then have to buy 10, 15 feet of all these people's property in order to widen the road to put
I'm
curb
sorry,
and
but
gutter?
we're,
I mean, I'm happy to talk to you after this, but that's
Okay.
not part of this agenda item.
it's not part of the agenda.
Okay.
We're just
Well-
talking about the parking right now.
Okay, well, there really is not a problem with parking. There might be an occasional event that people have, but there's really not a problem with parking at that point in time, so.
I guess my question would be to the residents that are here is how often is there events there where, you might need to park on the east side of the street, so to speak?
I don't even know if it's weekly. I know my wife has a group of ladies come over every other Tuesday in the summer, and sometimes there's maybe 10 cars. Sometimes there's 15, sometimes there's 5 cars, so.
And would that be a problem if there was no parking on the east side of the street?
Well, it's, what it does, you stretch out parking all the way down in front of, maybe quite a ways down the street, so it isn't as convenient. I would say, I really don't see a need for a no parking situation for anybody. The long-term parking of boat trailers and that, or utility trailers of some sort, yes, that should not be the situation. But for event situations, that's, it's not a regular occurrence by any means.
Okay,
So,
Thank you,
thank you
Paul.
for your time.
you betcha. Alder Denny.
So is these events typically, I would assume, are not overnight events? Could we potentially get into like a no overnight parking to kind of discourage at least the long-term type parking?
You're
not sure who I'm
you're-
talking
You're
to.
talking about it like the boats and the trailers and stuff on.
Right.
On the,
I mean, no overnight parking would then take away some of that stuff that may sit there for a long period of time. But it sounds like there's more to it's more complicated with some of the debris and the railroad property. But if it's just a simple couple of parking signs that no overnight parking would at least prevent somebody from doing that part of it.
well, then it would probably give the police department some authority also to remove any boat trailers or utility trailers that are parked on the grass on the east side. Is that correct?
Is that typically what PD does? I don't,
Typically, we won't go on, it would be more inspections for that.
okay. So if there was like let's say a utility trailer parked in a no parking zone,
Then we'd be able to do something.
then you would be?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So I guess if that's the direction the committee wants to go, like no overnight parking, then the recommendation would go on the council for a change in the municipal code, but we would ask for like a time frame. Is that 10 PM to 6 AM? Is that midnight to 6 AM? What is, I don't know what the,
Well, I guess I would defer to the alder in the district. I don't know the residents that well, but I was contacted by 2 people that their biggest concern was the trailers and the boats and the ancillary equipment. They weren't as concerned about cars per se, but I don't know the history behind it. But if that's a lever we can use, maybe that's an option.
Alder Henke.
Do we have any no parking overnight anywhere else? Anyone, can
In
you
the
think of
city?
any-
I
In the
don't
city,
have.
yeah.
Alder McElhenney, would you like to come up and would that,
I don't know if we have any no parking overnight.
I mean, do you think
But-
that you have an idea of like this, if they restricted parking overnight?
I will tell you
from-
very, very specifically, the calls I get are about extended parking with trailers and utility trailers and boat trailers. I have not received any complaints about cars or events or anything like that. It is, every call I've gotten in the last 4 or 5 years is they're back with their boat trailers and they're not parked, like just using it like for the day. They're parked there. That is where they're way off the road. So that is the feedback I have. And like I said, I don't want to micromanage where somebody's having an event and we have no place to park because there's no crossroads or anything like that in this. It's one road. So we can't say, well, you can park on this road or this road either. I don't want to micromanage, but I also want to kind of fix this constant problem of the boat trailers.
So Alder McElhaney, let me ask you this. This is city land, I'm assuming that they're parking the boat trailers and such on?
I wish Bill was here. He's the one who did it.
There's a photo in the packet that I put in there from our aerial photos that shows a boat that's backed in off the east side of the road.
Yeah,
and
I see this.
It's beyond our right of way. It's on the railroad.
Railroad
right-of-way.
property, which
Yeah.
that's another problem. I
Right.
mean, the railroad does not like that.
Right.
We have, and people have been fined by the railroad to have stuff and to throw debris on the railroad property. So, but we are, I'm more concerned with the right-of-way.
Right.
And that's up to this committee of what you think. Like I said, that the problem we're trying to do is people that, and it's every year. It's not like they don't know, and every year they're parking there, and he's gotten two complaints as well. It's some kind of phenomena that they park there, and then we get inspections. They send a letter, and then I get calls in between until the 30 days of reinspection, and then they move them.
So let me ask you this, if we were to post signage along the road that no parking, no utility trailer, no boat trailer parking, would that,
That I
allow-
don't know the legal thing about that. I don't know.
guess we,
Well, really, don't we have you can't do wheeled parking on grass?
Right.
Isn't that?
Right.
That's an ordinance too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, so there's, I mean, from a staff perspective, I can say that, if you wanted to restrict overnight parking on this stretch, and you just said from a certain time to a certain time, right, then we would post it as such, then PD would be able to enforce it during that time. And then, we could also post on a couple of those, no overnight parking signs as well, no yard waste dumping or something like that as well, at the same time, which we could do, but it's up to this committee. I don't know if PD has any recommendations or something that would help them at all, or.
yes, Mr. Book.
Yes. The boat situation, I don't own a boat. I live down there. I don't own a boat, so I don't have a trailer situation, okay? The people that have boats, usually you have a time period, a several-week time period in the spring of the year, and then in September, after Labor Day, people are putting their boats in, and they're pulling them out. And it's probably a little more of an issue in the fall of the year because they want to get their units winterized and they're scheduled, but they haven't pulled out this week. And I have to wait 2 weeks to get my boat winterized by the marine dealer. And so that the time period, there's probably just a few week time period with that is where you'll see boat trailers. Aside from that, other than maybe occasionally, like what you mentioned, I know where that particular boat was parked on railroad property, but I believe there is an ordinance already stating that we're not supposed to be parking because in 2006 or 2007, something like that, when my son turned 16, I bought him a car because I was sick of driving him to high school, and it was an oil leaker, and I didn't want the oil on my driveway. But anyway, didn't last too long, and I got a letter from the department stating that I'm not supposed to be parking, so I didn't park there anymore. But so we do have some ordinances on in place. So if we're not enforcing the current ordinances, I don't think it's necessary to add more ordinances on top of what we already have, right? So, thank you.
Yes, Alder Hanky.
Yeah, we have ordinances, but we're trying to get away from inspections and we're trying to get away from that 30-day wait period and the issues that arise from that. Where if we had a no parking, it could be enforced that very night and taken care of.
But would an overnight parking restriction keep people off the grass?
No, but I think it would give PD the ability to go and write them a ticket that day. At that night, yeah.
Right.
Correct, that morning.
Yes, Alder Gilselman.
So I thank you. I make a motion that we restrict overnight parking as on the addresses so noted from 12 midnight to 4:30 a.m. And then if there's appropriate signage with regard to dumping or whatever, that would be also appropriate. But I think the consensus here is to do it. And I'm just picking the 12 midnight arbitrary. I'm not, maybe 2:30 because of bar closings in some parts of the city. But for now, I'll just say from 12 o'clock midnight until 4:30 in the morning when people start to rise and go to work. So that's my motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion by Alder Gilselman to have parking restrictions between the addresses listed from 12 p.m. to 4:30, and we have a second by Alder Henke. And is there any further discussion? And all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 And no opposed. Thank you. And we'll move on to item number 3. And thank you, folks, for coming and sharing your. These next items number 3 through items number 9, are pretty much, I guess, housekeeping items for the right-of-way for Sherman Street. So we'll just go item number 3, discussion and possible action on state municipal agreement for Grand Avenue from Lakeview Drive to Kent Street. Staff recommends approval.
Second.
Motion made to approve by Alder Gilselman and seconded by Alder Dini. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, and that passes unanimously. Item number 4, discussion and possible action on revocable occupancy permit for parcel 1, 7255 Stewart Avenue of project ID 6999-09-02 Stewart Avenue.
I'll move to approve.
Okay, move to
Second.
approve by Alder Enke and a second by Alder Dini. No discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. And that approves unanimously. Item 5, discussion and possible action on revocable occupancy permit for parcel 3, 7120 Stewart Avenue of project ID 6999-09-02 Stewart Avenue. Do I have
I'll move to approve.
a motion to approve by Alder Henke and a second
Second.
by Alder Dini? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed, that passes unanimously. Number 6, discussion and possible action on revocable occupancy permit for parcel 12, 7019 Stewart Avenue of project ID 6999-09-02 Stewart Avenue. Did I have a motion?
Move to approve item 6.
Okay, we have a motion by Alder Dini to approve item 6. All those.
I'll second.
Second by Alder Henke. All those in favor, say aye.
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 And that too passes unanimously. Agenda item number 7 is discussion and possible action on a revocable occupancy permit for parcel 47, 5,000 Stewart Avenue of project ID 6999-09-02 Stewart Avenue. Do I have a motion to approve? Motion by Alder Dinney and
I'll second.
second by Alder Hinkie. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And item 8 is discussion and possible action of revocable occupancy permit parcel 514901 Stewart Avenue of project ID 6999-09-02 Stewart Avenue. Motion to approve by Alder Gisselman,
I'll second.
second by Alder Hinkie. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And last one on this is discussion and item 9 is discussable and possible action on accepting the study for rerouting of State Highway 52 and Business 51, City of Wausau. Is there any discussion on this, or?
Was there any surprises with the study? Are we comfortable with the way it came in?
I'm comfortable with it.
I guess I had a couple surprises on Thomas Street and Grand. They said they need to expand the southeast corner of that intersection, which surprised me a little bit. I thought it would have been the southwest side. Just little comments as I was reading through it.
I think the main thing that came out of the study is that kind of what we anticipated, that they don't expect a lot of traffic diversion just because it's signed differently. People are going to drive the routes they're used to. The majority of the traffic is local traffic. That's, no matter how you sign it, they're going to pick the route they want. You know, they were saying that maybe the out-of-town people who are coming through on 51 or 52, they may continue on that, or, but it was a relatively small amount according to the study. So I guess that was kind of what we anticipated, but this study kind of confirmed it.
Yes, Alder Dinney?
Yeah, so someone coming in on a GPS or a self-driving car would take the preferred route on the map. And is that piece, or you meant, it was mentioned about the south, or the east side of Thomas Street, we had an issue with that storm sewer. Is that related at all here with that piece of Thomas and Grand?
It's not, the storm, it's not related to like the traffic study and the reason for expanding that, that's just to allow trucks to turn and stuff on that corner from East Thomas and from Grand to East Thomas. So, but yeah, the storm sewer does cut across that corner.
But if it's work to be done, it could be coincidental or coinciding with that effort.
Yeah, timing wise, because I don't know how much additional right of way we have to expand that road right now, so we may not be able to widen that road at this point.
Okay.
So.
You got something?
It's a question. So
ahead, Alder
what
Gissel.
happens now? What's the process?
Yeah, good question.
Sure. So the next step would be an environmental report. Now, environmental report, it's not really for the soils, what you'd think environmental. It's more for impacts, whether they're social impacts or whether they adversely impact a certain demographic or whatever. So it would encompass all of that. So that would be the next step. The DOT did fund the traffic study, but they are requesting that the city of Wausau would fund the environmental study. So we are not, I know your next question is going to be, Gary, well, how much is that? We are not.
And in what budget is going to be in?
Yeah, we have asked the DOT to kind of give us a range, and they are not real sure because they don't really do reroutes very often. So they were they didn't give us an estimate. So I don't have I think we'd have to RFP it and get some numbers and see where those numbers come in. I don't anticipate it being a huge, because we're not acquiring any right of way. We're not, moving anybody. So I don't anticipate that there would be. And from the traffic study, because the diversion of traffic is relatively minor, I don't anticipate great impacts. So I don't know that the study would be that a lot of money, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, I think the study is really going to be an assessment of the reroute, and as Alan said, impacts, and so it's going to be a lot of desktop, working with other agencies, getting feedback from other agencies and stuff, so, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Would that RFP come back to us, even if we approve this for the environmental study, or?
I think that the proposal would be to go to finance and get a budget for it, and then, staff would write the RFP based on what we think that we need for that, and what the DOT's requirements would be, and then we would put that on the street with the budget.
Okay, so it'd be a whole different process.
But the results of the assessment would come back to here.
Okay,
Yep.
I guess I'll move to approve the study then.
Okay, motion to approve item 9 has been made by Alder Henke.
I'll second.
And second by Alder Denny. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And that too passes unanimously. On to item, agenda number 10, and that is 2022 MS4 Annual Report and Compliance Update, and this is TJ.
Yep, so every year I come to present to CISM to give an update on our MS4 compliance, just to give a general overview and then allow the committee to ask any questions regarding our MS4 program. So I have included our submittal to the DNR with the packet, and I'll just hit some highlights here. So throughout the past year, we had 14 active construction sites. An active construction site that we permit is a site that has groundbreaking activity of 1 acre or greater. And last year there were 14 active, in which we did 41 inspections. And I believe there was 14 in which got written up to make different improvements, making sure that the private construction companies are maintaining their soil erosion best practices. We have 73 ponds that are collect stormwater and help filter out sediment and phosphorus. All of those ponds were inspected last year, 10 of which needed improvements. And then along with those improvements to the ponds, we had collected 6,500 tons of either dirt, debris, garbage through street sweeping and catch basin cleaning or storm sewer cleaning. And that was then filtered through and used as beneficial reuse. And then with a lot of these activities, there's a dollar amount that's used. So this is just a rough idea from what DPW keeps track of for their time for maintaining the ponds, cleaning out storm sewers, education and outreach. It was estimated that the city spent $1,950,000 to maintain our MS4 program. So also within the packet, you can find how much salt, sand, or a salt sand mixture that we used through 2022, along with lots of other information if you want to peruse through it. Is there any other questions before I move on to our grant update?
Looks like we're good.
Okay. So a couple months ago, I think, in December, I brought a proposal from Strand to help us with a grant, planning grant, to update our MS4 program modeling, and then also a stormwater feasibility study. We applied for that grant in April, and earlier this week, we found out that we were awarded the grant. That was a 50-50 match with the DNR up to $170,000. So that was $85,000 for the city and $85,000 for the DNR. We were one of 19 communities that received a grant, and only one of 2 that received the full grant amount. So that's good news that we're moving forward with improving our MS4 program.
That's good news. Thank you. Any comments on this is just a update, so there's no motion made, but is there any comments or anything that need to be made or? Okay, then we will, thank you, TJ. We'll move on to item number 11, and that is discussion on annual road maintenance reconstruction and annual funding allocations for the same. I asked for this to be put on the agenda. I didn't ask, Alder Gisselman had asked to put this on because he was concerned about some of the roads not being repaired. And so with that, I would go ahead, Alder Gisselman, and
Well,
'Cause
I'm
I-
just raising the issue before this committee. I think this committee deals with the state of the infrastructure and the roads, so I was just wondering where we are. I know that every year we have only a certain amount of budget for this, and just sort of that, I think it's a concern within my district, the state of the streets, and I thought it would be appropriate somehow to be talked about at this committee.
I think one of the things, I thought might be helpful for the committee was I had the information pulled for the last 5 years, right? And the difference between, what we're budgeting from the levy, every year, and then how important the TID is to our infrastructure, because they contribute, the TIDs, as they're doing well and development happens, contributes a lot of money for us. A lot of our street matching funds with DOT funds come from TIDs, like Stewart Avenue from 48th to 72nd is an example that's being reconstructed next year, and there's going to be, a multi-use path that goes along with that, and that's a lot of infrastructure that's going in next year, and that's all being paid out of the TID, to match the DOT funding. So if that had to go on the levy, that's a heavy burden to try to do that. So I think last year seemed to be the highest levy amount that we've had in the last 5 years. We're like about 1.9 million. I think this next year, in '24, we may be cresting that, or maybe a little bit more from the levy. So we will see how the council feels, about the infrastructure budget when it comes forward. So
I have a question for you, Mr. Lindman. You say that a lot of these streets get paid through, this particular street is getting paid through a TID. What about these neighborhood streets? I know Alder Gisselman had mentioned Cherry Street for one is in really bad shape, and I'll just go on for my neighborhood. There's a whole slew of streets that are 19th century streets, I'll call them, because they're in bad shape. They're no curb and gutter. There's no drainage. And I look at the 5-year plan, and they're more like on the 100-year plan. Is there any way in the future to tap TID monies to get more of these neighborhood streets fixed?
Well, the neighborhood has to be within the TID, right, for one. And the TID has to have money, within it. So lots of times it's it's the larger arterial, more traveled streets that, that get the TID money. That, just because that they're in the TID or within the half-mile boundary. So, and those streets are typically the ones that we try to receive federal state funding for as well, and then use the TID to match those. So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
Alder Denny.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with how we've allocated in the past. I mean, different needs come up different years, but generally speaking, has there been maybe like a linear percentage that we try to? I mean, we know we have X number of streets. If we attack so many per year as a percentage of our levy, we could predict what kind of a complete turnover we can have on road repair. Is there a way to maybe put that into our budget or strategy as in terms of percentage, or do we just do we back into it by knowing what we can get done in a particular year?
we basically back a couple streets in, the worst streets that we can, are the highest need, and fit them within the budget. When we put that 5-year program together, I can bring that list back next month at other times. I don't know, maybe Lori can help me out here, what that number was on the bottom. How many million, it's a monumental number. I've brought that to this committee before. It would be.
I think one of the things, when I don't know if it was like in 2017 or 18, we had kind of looked at our infrastructure budget at that time and what we were paying out of the levy. We were specifically looking at the levy for that point in time. And we were about 1.5 million for streets out of the levy. It came to the point, and we were looking at how many, what our cost is for a local mile of street. And so we kind of came up with the point that we really needed 4 million or about 4.1 million annually out of the levy to maintain and not fall further behind. And so, when at that time, we looked at $4 million, obviously that's probably higher at this point, and that was just to not continue to fall behind. So there's a significant burden there for the city to overcome. Yeah.
So if I may, I'd like to see that, recommend that we take a look at that 5-year plan again, or the context maybe even of the history, so that as the budget process is underway very soon, we can start to account for it, and it may be something we have to maybe set a goal for the next 3, 4, 5 years before we hit that number, because I'm sure we don't want to. Well, I don't want to make any assumptions, but if we know what we're up against, we can better long-term plan on this. And so I'd like to see that.
Sure, we can bring back so when we rate the streets, we're re-rating the streets again this year. Every other year we re-rate them, so I think more of the streets will probably fall into that 3, 4 category. So it's rated 1 through 10, 10 being brand new, 1 basically being gravel. So anything that gets down into the 3 or the 4 category are pretty bad streets, and then we consider those for reconstruction. So, I could put a list together. We have a list together of all the streets that are rated 3 to 4. I think one thing too that, like this year, I probably noticed a lot of concrete pavement repair going on. You can see in 2023 there we put $650,000 in the concrete pavement repair, and that, I think that's a good place to stay. And I know there is proposed TID funding of $350. So then that contract should be able to stay in that $650,000 range for the next several years. And one issue, or one area I think we could increase is the asphalt overlay. There's years where I think when that budget comes down and it gets to be cutting, I think it's hard to cut a street, but it was always easy to cut the asphalt overlay.
Mm-hmm.
So we needed, when it comes to Marion, we need to cut $200,000-$300,000. You cut that down. Now you can see, like in 2019, we had a $100,000 asphalt overlay. Well, that gets you 1 or 2 residential blocks in the whole city. So if there's one increase, I would say that would recommend there would be a big bang for the buck would be the asphalt overlay. Just my sense of it. There were years where we had, even when I first started here in the early 2000s, where we had over $1 million asphalt overlay budget in the early 2000s, and I think that's just kind of been cut and cut and cut to a point where if you look this year, we're doing Merrill Avenue from on the north end of town. They just milled that, going up towards the NTC campus. So basically, that whole budget's being taken, that $350,000, to mill those inside lanes and to put that in there. So, but it's a worthy project because we milled the outside lanes and did that several years ago and held up. So now we're doing so that, we had to break that project up into 2 years because we didn't have enough money to do it in 1 year. But if we can't, getting to reconstruct streets is getting, the price per foot is about doubled in the last 10 years. So to reconstruct a street is getting very expensive, but I think if we can get more money, keep the money in the concrete repair and get more money in the asphalt overlay would help you know, help the program also. Not that we necessarily have to reconstruct every street, but
That's sort of where that we don't have to reconstruct, but certain streets, and I think the instance of a Forest Street above 10th and above, when they start to fall apart already right in front of our eyes, maybe not this year, but I think that should get on some kind of a short list so that, we can take care of that for that neighborhood, because that's,
And one other thing we struggle with, obviously, too, we're an old city relatively, so the infrastructure under the road is not necessarily the greatest. So when we're doing asphalt overlay, we don't want to overlay a street with really bad, or the lead service program that's coming through.
Right.
So we're going to have to balance that, because we're going to have this lead service lateral replacements in the next 5 years. We're going to be picking up a lot of streets, so.
and I know my district and is both of that. The streets are starting to, and I don't know what level what number they have, but I know that that's a neighborhood that's, I think, an older neighborhood in the city, and I think that's one of the targeted areas. So,
Correct.
I'm being torn because you have both things going and trying to keep the balls in the air
Right.
at the same time. I get that, but
But I would agree, there are certain streets that we can't wait on. We have to put some effort into them. But
I'm sorry, could you come up to the mic? I can't hear you.
Could I share a public comment? Or not during this time?
It's up to the committee.
I think if it pertains to the agenda item.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, it does.
And state your name and address. And
Hi, Jonathan Smith, 400 River Drive, and I wanted to uplift the focus of this and the budget, and how Eric and probably his whole crew are doing a lot with very little, that we're probably on a cycle of turnover for road reconstruction that is not feasible to keep roads in a good condition. And that it's really interesting to see the various things that are going on at the same time. And I think that the city is re-envisioning what we can do when it comes to agenda item number 9, and the possibility of the tool design, which is not the agenda number that we're on that I support. And any re-envisioning or redesigning thoughts when it comes to how to make pedestrian improvements and bicycle improvements at times when budgets are so lean can feel like a waste, and they're the things that will help us continue to go forward into the future. And anytime I ride my bike instead of take my car, I do a 2,000th or less the amount of damage that it would if I jumped in my Prius. So I just wanted to uplift, thanks for doing what you can with the budget that you have. And I don't know how we could better, up that. And I want the re-envisioning and the ability to think into the future to continue on with our existing current needs and trying to meet those as well. So,
Thank you. Alder Dini.
Yeah, to that point, when we defer, well, there's other factors, a lot of factors, obviously, and with the traffic, the amount of traffic, can we get by deferring a little longer on lower trafficked streets than others? But to the, I think, Alan, you had mentioned it once before, that for every deferred piece of maintenance, so if it's say $1 to fix it today, over year, now that turns into maybe $1.50 or eventually $2. Is there any type of rule of thumb or study on what deferral really costs us in the end? And deferring feels good in the moment, but when we have to pay it back later, it's still going to cost us, and it's going to cost us more. Is that a true statement that you would agree with, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, the more you defer stuff, obviously, the prices seem to keep going up, so I think you're just going to pay more later. And the world becomes in worse shape. Like, in a typical cycle of a roadway, say we reconstruct a street, in the DOT's mind, or the way we do pavement design, is within 15 years, you should mill and overlay that street. I can say that's not happening in the city. If we give a street that's 15 years old, we're not putting a partial mill and overlay on it, like would be the recommended pavement design. We're letting that go because we have so many other streets. I mean, we do a good job with seal coating and putting on, we're doing different preservative methods. We're putting on a product called GSB 88. We're putting on Replay, which is a soil and a pavement preservative. So we're trying to preserve our pavements, but we're not doing the mill and overlays. So then what happens if you don't do the mill and overlay at the suggested 15 years? It's going to deteriorate beyond the point where you can do a partial mill and overlay, and then you're a full depth mill and overlay. So in that regards, it is going to cost you more with deferred maintenance. So, and that's, I think, something people don't, sometimes they'll see us milling a road or repaving a road that's maybe not as bad as the road right next to it, but there's a science behind that too. If a road gets too bad, it doesn't pay to do a partial mill and overlay. So I think some people don't understand the concepts behind that too. So
It's like buying a new car and driving it 30,000 miles before you do an oil change. It just, you've got to do it.
yeah. So I can bring back that list. And the list has already been created, but I can bring it to this committee of all the streets that would need or would be potential for reconstruction and the dollar amount associated with that at the next meeting, if you'd like to see that.
Alder Henke?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to see that. And then you also mentioned the lead service. Is that going to be a different bucket? Is that going to be handled internally, or is that going to come to this committee to?
No, the lead service is handled through the commission,
Okay.
the Sewer and Water Commission.
Oh, Water Commission. Okay. All right.
So do we need a motion?
That would tie into street remodels also at the same time when you did that?
No, I think there's going to be, the amount of lead service rod replacements is not, it's going to overwhelm the street reconstruction. So there's going to be, so that'll be another thing we probably might want to talk about at this committee. So we may have to get into that a little bit, Eric, at this, we will have to look at that. So if you imagine the lead service laterals are going to come in and you say you have a block with, we'll just make up a number, 30 homes on it, and all 30 need to be replaced, you're going to have 30 holes cut in the street, depending on how you do it. I mean, if we can, and we can bring that back, there's going to be boring, there's going to be, but inevitably, there's probably going to be 30 holes in that street to replace those laterals. So now you have an old street with 30 patches in it.
So, to answer your question, Alder Denny, I don't think there's any motion to be made here. It was just put on here for discussion. I guess we can make suggestions for further meetings, but
And we can bring back, I know you, Lori, can maybe help me out again. We brought the budget back with the street reconstructions in it, and that was brought to this committee about 2 months ago with that number, so we can revisit that. We can show you that budget again, what we're proposing for '24. Then we can just go ahead and double it and
see what the finance company, what the finance committee says, huh? All right. No more discussion on this item. We have one more item left, and who wants to take care of that?
I'll move to adjourn.
Motion by Alder Henke to adjourn, seconded by Alder Denny. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, everybody.